Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm in Nashville and it's cold as heck here.
Maybe it makes me feel just a wee bit better.
All right. I mean, you should expect it in Milwaukee. I lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin for 5 years.
Oh, did you?
And yeah, and I know that it stays cold for a long time there.
Yeah, it's brutal, but what are you gonna do?
And I loved it there, by the way. I really did, but I finally had to get somewhere where I could do more business.
Well, that and the money in Lake Geneva is just outrageous. Just like be able to afford a house there anymore. The prices are out of control.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can see why. That's beautiful. I mean, I leased a house for 3 years on the lake, and it was absolutely gorgeous. But
oh yes.
At the end of that time, I said, wow, this money that I'm spending every month on a house is so much money. I could buy a real house in Nashville for half the price.
Is cost of living down there
that cheap? Did. What?
Is cost of living down there that cheap?
It was when I moved here 20 years ago. It's risen some because there's so many people moving here. But yeah, you can still get more for your money here than any of the major places, that's for sure.
And I think it's pretty interesting in this day and age that, probably back when you started, that you'd have to be in like LA, New York City, Chicago, maybe like a bigger city to make those connections. But, with the internet and everything, you can still be a very successful musician in producing sort of the maybe a little more eclectic music that you do, and you can still do it in Nashville and you not have any issues.
You could probably do it just about anywhere as long as you have the gear and the setup. I mean, the first thing we did is we installed a studio into the bottom floor of this house we found, and it was a house where the bottom floor you couldn't see from the front because it's around the back of the house. It's like a double split level ranch house.
Sure.
So the upstairs seems like a whole house to itself, and then the downstairs was readily available for a studio because it had a full guest quarters, a kitchen, a bathroom, all that stuff. And we just went in right off the bat. We had two of the rooms completely corrected, put up panels and things that made them sound perfect, right? And put in a studio, and that was probably the smartest thing I ever did.
All right, hey everyone, this is Alex from Riff and Rock Music Talk, and I am going to be speaking to you. I'm going to be speaking today with an absolute wonderful guest. I am so happy and so delighted. I'm a huge fan, which is one of the best guitarists that's been around for decades. So Adrian Belew, thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me, and I guess now you just reminded me that I'm decades old, but that's okay.
Well, first full power off to a roaring start. And you just wrapped up your tour with the Power Trio, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. We got here just before my birthday, a couple of days before Christmas, and following on the heels of 41 shows around Canada and the United States, and they were all really pretty fabulous, I have to say. The Power Trio that I have had now for 4 years, Julie Slick and Tobias Ralph on bass and drums respectfully, somehow we just caught on fire on this tour. Well, one thing that happened is we changed the way that we approached doing the music live. I put together a kind of a thing that represents the new musical concept I've been working with called Flux, which is music that never repeats. It's music that never plays the same twice. It does repeat, but it's never the same order and so on. And we did a kind of a live version of that with my material from my solo records and King Crimson. And it was so fast-paced and so energetic and so exciting and surprising. I think, audiences really, really liked it. So it was a great tour.
And so do you think you'll be cutting a live album from that tour? Because from what I heard, too, is that you were almost like a DJ, just kind of like mixing in tracks as you were performing the set. It was kind of a seamless performance.
Yeah, that's right. Everything would be interrupted by something else. So you might be playing one of the songs from one of my solo records or a Crimson song, and when you least expect it, what we call a snippet, that would be a pre-recorded sound. It could be rain or laughter or something else, anything really. In fact, we used ones from the actual Flux app that I put out. The snippets would occur, and then as soon as they were over, we had it timed so we would go right into the next thing. So
it was
pretty fun that way.
Excellent. And so for those of us who unfortunately don't have iOS devices, tell us a little bit about, and you said Flux is music that's played never the same twice, but what kind of style is it? What kind of sound is it so we can get an idea of what's going on here?
Well, okay. It's a concept I've had in mind for decades, since we've already established that I'm decades old. But I had to wait for the technology to actually arrive that would allow you to do this idea. So it's bits and pieces of music and songs and sounds and effects and everyday ordinary sounds and all kinds of things like that. That, as I said, they kind of quickly interrupt each other.
Right.
So you might be listening along to a song, and you might actually hear the whole song every now and then.
Okay.
But most often, you'll hear some portion of it. Maybe it's the second verse in the chorus, and it'll start into the guitar solo, and bingo, it goes into a whole different thing.
Okay.
There's probably 50 new songs in it. I mean, I've been writing songs for it for 5 years.
Okay.
Maybe 60 or 70 pieces of music, and literally hundreds of these sonic snippets, which I find them intriguing because that's the only reason they're there is because I like the sound of them.
Sure.
So they can be anything. A lot of times they're interesting guitar things that I've done that don't sound anything like a guitar, or they're a sound effect or a keyboard sound, or they're everyday sounds, like I said, like someone starting up their car or phone ringing, whatever. And so the effect of it is that you listen to it for a half an hour at a time. It automatically shuts off after a half an hour and brings up the play button again if you want to play some more. The app does. And so the effect of it is that every half an hour of music is entirely different.
Right.
It comes at you differently. There are different versions of some of the pieces in there, particularly the songs. There are even songs that have same song with different words, different mixes, different things. So even when you do hear something more than once, it may not be exactly the same. Let me see what else I can tell you about it. It's never finished, unlike anything else in the world of music. It's a living, breathing entity. I can add things to it anytime I want. And the last thing that's very important about it, being on an iOS device, of course, a phone or iPhone or iPad, it is filled with ever-changing, pretty amazing-looking visuals that morph and change all the time, and they don't ever sync up with the music, so you never get the same combination of music and visuals either.
So, and this had been in production for quite a few years, and I'm curious with the app itself, I mean, you don't have to go into the nitty-gritty, but is it like an algorithm that determines when things are going to shift, or is it just like in the coding goes, oh, nope, it's been 2 minutes, time for this to happen. Nope, it's been 3 minutes, time for this to happen. That's the part I was fascinated about when I'm trying to conceptualize how this works.
Well, okay, there's a company that I've worked with for the last 2.5 years in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Really some very sharp young guys who designed this thing called a Roulette Engine.
Okay.
And what it does is every time you press the play button or every time you press the advance button that moves to the next piece, if you don't want to hear something, you can do that. You know, if something comes on, you say, I'm ready to hear the next thing. Bang, you hit that. What happens each time is it loads in a whole new half an hour worth of randomized bits.
Got it.
It does, though, however, have, because we do have control over it. So it's controlled chaos, controlled randomism, in the sense that you can go in and you can assign how much percentage of randomness some piece has.
Sure.
So, for example, if I put in a new song this week, I'm going to want that to come up more often than everything else for a while. So it could have 100% randomism. And then after, a month or two, maybe I'd cut it back to being 50%. So you can control the amount of times that things come in. It also has things built into it that avoid you hearing the same thing in the same half an hour or the same thing in a row or things like that. And one last thing that it does, which I think is very clever, you have a favorite button, as you do on most app things.
Sure.
In the corner. If you press that, it takes whatever you're listening to it and puts it in a playlist. Now that does two things. It means, first of all, you can hear that piece anytime you want without it being random. So you can go back at any point and hear that song or that piece of music, anything you want, anytime. What it does, secondly, is it changes and personalizes your randomness, because it knows that, okay, you favored that, so you'd really like to hear that a little more often.
Okay.
So it actually teaches you teaching the computer what your
Wow.
favorite bits are, and they happen a little more often, still randomly, but a little more often.
And you're still adding stuff as this goes along, so this isn't just like, well, we released it, we're walking away from it. It's now you can just keep adding as much controlled chaos as you want to this, as long as this service is going.
Yes, I can't do it like all the time like I hoped I could, because of one reason, and here I'll tell you this reason. It's a pretty strange thing, that a rule that Apple iTunes has.
Okay.
Every time I upload something, it starts, you have reviews, and the reviews are very important. If someone goes to see an app and they see that it's got, 5-star reviews galore, they're more likely to buy it. So every time I upload something new, it erases all those reviews and starts over. So for the moment, I'm going to wait a little while, and I'm going to probably release things in small packages. Like, here's 10 minutes more of snippets and a couple of songs and stuff, because right now we have 25-star reviews, and frankly, I don't want to ruin that yet.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Flux is just getting off the ground. I'm very concerned at how to get this to be marketed to all the people who might like it, because I think that's a lot of people, and right now it's not even getting close to that kind of numbers.
Definitely.
So I'm going to have to do everything in my power now to promote Flux. And since it's brand new, something that's never been done, it's not an easy thing to get people behind. It's like if someone introduced a new cola. How long is it going to be before someone's finally going to decide, oh, take a sip of that, That's kind of how this is, and especially since you just mentioned it's only at this point on iOS devices, that limits it a bit.
Sure.
The cost of coding this was so enormous, and as I said, it took a couple of years. It may not have to take a couple of years now that we've worked it all out, but the cost of doing it for anything other than iOS now would be about the same.
Sure.
So until Flux has actually done something worthy of being able to afford that expense, I don't think I'm going to be able to do much more with it on a different format, and that's a shame, because I would love to have it. I would love to have it on my Mac computer on a big screen, for one thing, but I'd also love all the Android users, because I know I get a lot of people talking about that, and I always feel bad, because it's like, well, yeah, I can't do that yet because I haven't even made a penny yet. I can't afford to go that much in debt over this thing.
Yeah.
Although I'm loving it, and I will say this, people who are checking it out, I guess your question was, what kind of thing is it? The people who are checking it out say it's so much what my thing is, Adrian Belew, has been over all these years on all these different records. It's everything.
Sure.
And it really is. It's there's no musical boundaries. There's everything in there that you can imagine, from orchestral things to there's country songs, there's pop songs, there's King Crimson-like songs, there's every kind of imaginable thing in there. Anything I love the sound of, and anything that I ever wanted to put on a record but couldn't because it was, say, 20 seconds long or was very, whatever, it's all in Flux.
Right.
So Flux gives me, as an artist, the complete package. I can put anything that I love can go in there, and hopefully when you hear it all together, it's so varied and so surprising that it's very exciting.
Well, I hope as soon as I can to, admittingly, I am an Android user, so I'm in the same boat where, I know a litany of your material, and I'm sitting there going, I want to listen to it. I'm wondering if, there might be at some point in the future, like a CD version of, like, this is just like a sample for those of us who want to be able to at least experience what it sounds like, but unfortunately aren't able to get the whole, be able to hop on board with iOS.
Yeah, that's in my plan. Once again, I from the very beginning, I had that in my thinking, but I wanted to establish this first, because I don't want people then just to run out and buy the CD and avoid ever trying Flux.
Right.
because it's really a different experience. If it were on a CD, which it will be, you wouldn't get the visuals. You wouldn't get the sense that, okay, every time I put this on, it's going to be completely different.
Definitely.
You wouldn't get the surprise element and the excitement. What you would get is the material. So what I am going to do at some point is take my favorite material, songs and pieces of music, and maybe even some of my favorite snippets, and probably put out more than one CD, because let's face it, there's hundreds of this stuff.
Right.
I mean, it'd be hard to decide on putting it all on one CD.
Right.
Would be impossible. So, yeah, that's going to happen in the future, and that'll have to satiate the Android people for the moment. But it's not my favorite.
Sure.
It's not my favorite solution, because I really think what Flux is it's a listening experience, honestly. You're looking at something, even if you're not looking at it, it's a listening experience. It's a bit interactive. You can change some of the visuals that have come up, or my paintings, and you can move your iPhone around and they change. And, there's so much more to it, pages of information and talk about things that, how we recorded things and all that kind of stuff in there that it would be missing from the simple CD format.
Yeah.
Flux is so much more than a CD or anything else that's come before it, which is what I love about it.
And there's also an app, too, that's like an effects rack, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, there's a professional-style audio processor.
Yes.
And when I say professional, I mean it's very high level. Now, it's called Flux Effects, and it's for your iPad.
Okay.
It has an XY screen on it. So you move your finger around on the screen, and as you move, every little move you make changes the sounds of whatever effects you've decided on. So you can get radical sounds to happen that would never be able to happen any other way. And because of course it's being fluxed, they never are really quite the same, because you'd have to position your finger and move it around exactly the same to get exactly the same thing. So
right.
It's amazing. It has 30 effects, and you put 5 of them at a time together, and you decide which aspect of each effect is controlled by the X or the Y. It also has a full-blown professional sequencer, which means you can take one step at a time. You can make a different sound and put it in there, and then when you press the sequencer, it'll go through an amazing amount of sounds. And you determine how fast they happen and how long they are and all that kind of stuff. It's got a very, very deep editing page to it, which means that you can get very, very precise in what you want each little thing to do. And it's cool as heck.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
Cool as the other side of the pillow. There you go.
It's kind of fascinating, too, that you have this, this effects, basically like an effects processor, as you call it, and, it's on an iPad, and I'm reminded of, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a video of you from, I think 1984 on YouTube, where you're going through your sounds, and how to make the elephant on Elephant Talk, and how to make the rhino and the birds and everything. And I think it's so amazing that, we jumped 30 years, and back then you were standing behind towers and towers of modulators and effects racks and everything, and now it's on a little 8x5 screen, the same exact power almost.
Yeah, I would actually way more power, to be honest. You can get thousands and thousands of combinations out of this program, and it costs $20. That's another thing to think about.
Sure.
All those racks and racks of gear, they were hundreds of thousands of dollars over my life, Now I can get it for $20. It does a lot of radical things. I mean, if you're a guitar player, for example, and you want to get a good chorus or a good fuzz tone or something, it's not that, because there's so much of that already. You've got so much of that where you can dial up the sound of any vintage amp and all that. It is not that. It's a new thing. It's truly a digital domain that allows you to go in and do impossible things. The other thing I would say about Flux Effects before we leave that subject is it's not for guitar players only.
Okay.
It's for any sound thing that you want. You can take any sound source and put it in there and change it and mangle it or enhance it in so many ways. So you can be a keyboard player, a singer, a DJ, a producer. You could put a favorite song of yours into Flux and see what comes out, and it's a lot of fun.
Sure.
And it's really easy to do unless you want it to be difficult. In other words, if you want to design your own wildest stuff, that takes some time and it's very deep. But if you just want to get in there and go through the 200 programs that we've already written for you, it's simple as pressing a button and moving your finger around on the screen.
And so, just kind of as you mentioned sort of creating these wild sounds. I'm a little bit curious because you are pretty well known for making some very wild sounds like a guitar, almost like the progenitor of making these very non-guitar tones. How, even back then or even now, how do you go about that process? Do you just wake up and go, oh, I want to make this sound today, or do you just sit there and push buttons and dials until something interesting comes your way?
I have so many ways now over my lifetime that I've been able to do that. It's never one particular way. There are times when I say, gee, I really want to try to figure out how to get my guitar to sound like this.
Okay.
Or sound like a rhinoceros or something. And I'm very good with analyzing what sounds are and what the components are. I think I have a natural talent for that.
Okay.
But what happens a lot of times, I just get a new box or a new guitar or something, or I tune to a new tuning, or I do something that sort of anticipates, okay, now, I'm in experimental mode, and I just start fooling around. And sometimes, especially when I was much younger, I would stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning designing sounds that way. And, when I get a piece of gear, I don't look at the manual or anything. I just go, I get inside it, and I try to make it do things it's not supposed to do. And, and that's probably one of the reasons why that I've gotten such a large vocabulary over time of all these things, because I don't try to make them do the normal things. Although back in the day when I first started and there weren't any ways to do this stuff, it was quite an accomplishment to get your guitar to sound violin-like or sound like a clarinet or something. And now, you can do that pretty easily with all the sampling. The sampling doesn't really, does nothing for me because there's no adventure there and there's no challenge. And when you're trying to sound like some other instrument, for example, you really have to think like that instrument or that player. You have to understand, if you're playing a wind instrument, what an embouchure is and how this affects the tones and all the various ways you can move your mouth or things to get that to happen. Or if you're a violinist, you have to understand plucking and bowing and double stopping and all the things that go into that, So it's a little bit of a study to emulate a real instrument if you're not doing it with a sample. But even if you have a piano sample in your synthesizer, you can't just play it like a guitar still. You have to think like a pianist.
So it sounds like, too, that you kind of avoid sampling that, hey, even if you wanted to make a clarinet or an oboe sound, you're not going to just pull up an oboe sample. You're going to go, all right, what combination of pedals and amps and this and that's going to make my oboe sound so that it actually has that soft, almost quack-like noise of the oboe.
Yeah, that's true. In most cases, I would rather do it myself and design it myself, as that's the fun of it and the challenge. There are things where I find a sound, and there's so many ways to deal with this. For example, you can take sampled sounds, and then, as with Flux Effects, you can alter them. And then the fun really starts, because then you start getting sounds that you've never heard before.
Right.
And that's the final thing in my life that is so thrilling. The thing that keeps me really inspired is actually not trying to sound like other things, but coming up with things that you've never heard sound like that ever. Flux is full of that stuff. Flux music and Flux Effects is kind of one of the paintbrushes I use to create those. So
you use this yourself in creating your sounds. I'm also wondering, because since you've been doing this again, we'll hit on it for a couple of decades. Do you find it easier, harder? Is there sort of like a difference in the process for making these sounds, making these tones, as the technology has changed over the years?
Well, the only hard thing about it is there's so much now.
Sure.
So, it takes so much more time to decide what tools you want to use. I kind of look at all this. I'm an amateur painter, and I kind of look at it like painting. You can use a brush, you could use a pencil, you could use an airbrush, you could use a 3D computer. You could, so it's the same with the guitar and processing tools and all the effects and even acoustic things that we do in the studio that are just, playing a cymbal with a bow or something, it's all just tools to use to get the coloration that you're looking for. But the thing is, there are so many more of those tools available now than ever before. I don't think it's humanly possible to keep up with them. It used to be, say, in the 80s when, a lot of technology was just coming into view. I could pretty much keep my finger on the pulse of it and try just about everything, and I was known for that. Now it would take. I mean, how can you do that? Just go into any guitar store these days, and just turn on one of the keyboards and see how many hours you can sit there.
And that's not to mention, like, there's been sort of an influx of like boutique guitar pedal companies creating these sort of exclusive but really wild and radical guitar pedals or bass pedals that are just producing these wild sounds. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's a bassist named Juan Alderete, and he does like this. That's his whole website, is that he talks about these pedals, like stuff like the Rainbow Machine and stuff by Pigtronics, just this wild stuff that just didn't exist before.
Yeah, I work with those people. I just talked to
really?
Dave Coltai yesterday, who is the inventor of Pigtronics.
Wow.
I mean, I like to think that I've had, quite a hand in the development of all this stuff over the years, and it still thrills me, so much. I mean, I think there's a lot of different sides to my musicality. I'm a songwriter, a singer. I play lots of instruments. I like to produce. I like to write. I like to sit in my bedroom and play an acoustic guitar. But when we're talking about, the sound capabilities, that's kind of the thing that has always interested me and set me apart a little bit. And I still feel that way. And that's one of the beauties, not to keep hammering on Flux, but it's one of the beauties of Flux. I finally have places to put the results of those things, because it used to be I'd come up with some weird little thing, but there was nowhere to put it. So now, artistically, it's increased my output a lot.
Or you'd have to find a song that, like, hey, this sound actually fits in the song, instead of, you can't just like shoehorn in something that sounds like a velociraptor in a song that doesn't need it,
No, what I always said about that is, if you do have something that's really convincing like that, an elephant trumpeting or a rhino, you're going to have to write a song for it to live in, or otherwise it's a gimmick, But if it's needed in the song and it becomes a musical part of the song, then it's not a gimmick. It's really, that's when it really works well. So, if you can imagine it, all of a sudden you're singing a song about being around the ocean and the seagull sounds come in from your guitar, that makes sense.
It's
Otherwise, it sounds like, why are you doing that?
Right. No, definitely. And it's amazing that you've been doing this for so long, and that we're seeing sort of like this newer generation. There's been a couple of generations of people sort of following that footsteps of creating this sort of, as we said before, controlled chaos. And sort of speaking on that idea of trajectory, as we're kind of getting near the end, one of the things I did want to also, massive kudos that you started off, ended 2013, started 2014, getting some pretty heavy blows to your career, but you're starting off 2015 and ending 2014 unbelievably strong, it seems like. Well,
it was troublesome. It was really kind of maybe one of the roughest times in my career. Getting, let go from Nine Inch Nails, and then finding out that King Crimson was going to go on without me. Those two big hits.
Sure.
I'll be totally honest with you. It made me sit down and almost just be immovable. I sat in my chair every day for weeks. I just couldn't do anything.
Sure.
For a while. It really affected me. So damaging.
It hit your core.
Yeah, it just really made me think, what am I doing, and why do I continue, and do I want to just stop now?
Sure.
I've done enough to say I can stop if I want and feel okay about it. And it was just really hard, But who doesn't go through that? What sports figure or what business person or what, student, or name the person, doesn't get to a point where everything just gets to that level. That was my time to go through that. I went through it. I'm fine with it, and it lit a fire under me as usual. because I think maybe I work best a little bit under pressure. And so what I got from all of that is, well, now I have to pick up the pieces and move on. And I decided, look, from this point on, I'm going to be Adrian Belew. I don't want to be in somebody's band. I don't care about any of that stuff anymore. I've done enough of that. I want to use the rest of my lifetime to express what music I have and still left inside me, and I think I have a ton of it left. So you know, we put the power trio back in
right.
On the road. I started recording tons and tons more of my own stuff for Flux, and by the end of the year, as you said, we traveled around Europe twice, Australia, you know, America, Canada, put out a couple new records, put out Flux Effects. I mean, I always have things in the works.
Okay.
And they're always bubbling under the surface there. It's just, I don't tell people about them because you don't want to say something too much about something until it's a reality. So fortunately, I was prepared to move forward and do other things. I hadn't just been sitting on my thumbs waiting for Robert Fripp to call me.
Right. And if you don't want to delve into it, I totally understand. But I'm gonna poke that subject just a little bit. So, in the previous interviews, you mentioned that, he kind of said that this is just not the lineup for you. Is it because they were playing the older material? Was there any like a specific reason, or is it he just kind of went in his mystical Robert Frippdom that, nope, you're just not in this one?
I've thought about it a lot. I think the obvious answer is yes, he wanted to go and back to a different time of King Crimson music in which I was not involved. So obviously, I shouldn't be involved then in it now. I mean, I'm not Greg Lake, and I'm not the guys who created that music. I'm Adrian Belew. If you're playing anything from 1981 on, though, I wrote it, and I sang it and created it. So what I said to him is, if you're not playing anything that I wrote or co-wrote with you, then I'm fine. But if you are, then I should be in the band. Now, having said that, that's what happened. They didn't play really anything of mine. And that's fine. So if you want to do that, I'm fine with that. And in fact, I've said this many times. Had Robert come to me instead and said, "I'm ready, let's do a new version of King Crimson," I would have probably fallen off my seat because I was in the middle of Flux and touring and so many other things.
Right.
I would have had to say, "Gee, can we wait a year?" So I don't blame anyone for whatever choices they have and their, what they want to do musically. I'll take it on trust that Robert didn't do it as some spiteful thing or something mean towards me. I don't think it was that, although I know that working with the people he's working with now, he says he's happier than ever. Maybe he wasn't happy with me. I don't know. I didn't know that. I thought that we had a great relationship for 33 years, and I still want to think that. So I'm not going to go down the path of wondering why did he reject me? Because I don't think he rejected me. I think what happened is he wanted to do a different thing musically that didn't make sense for me to be a part of. And it's simple.
And I think that's a great attitude to have instead of sitting there like ruminating on why this, why that. Just go, hey, you know what? It is what it is. Let's start making some kick-ass music.
Oh man, you can't be in today's music business without being completely busy. You have to, you really have to get up every day and take care of your social network stuff, your Facebook page, your this, your that. You've got to be completely making your next T-shirt and designing your CD cover and putting together the next tour you're doing and answering questions and doing interviews and of course writing new music and playing new music and fooling with new effects and things. I just, I keep myself thoroughly busy, and that's the only way that I would like it to be. If I ever get to the point where I don't want to do that, then I guess it's time to stop, but I don't think that'll ever happen.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to be respectful of your time. Just to wrap up, we have 4 stock questions that we ask everyone we interview, and so we're going to run through those real quick. But actually, before we do, this is sort of an interesting predicament because we interviewed another guitarist a couple years back, and coincidentally, you were mentioned in one of the questions, and we'll get to that in just a second. But the first question we always ask is, how would you describe yourself or your sound in one tweet? So, 140 characters.
Everything and anything.
All right. And then if you were to cover a song, what song would you like to cover?
Ooh, that's a tough one. You know, I mean, the Beatles were what inspired me when I was a kid, and I always go back to that. Probably be a Beatles song, and I have done that already before. But if it weren't a Beatles song, I don't know, maybe I would take something that's really current, like somebody like Lady Gaga or something, and just completely trash it my own way.
Well, so that's kind of convenient. So the next question we ask is, if you could hear someone else cover one of your songs, what would it be? Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the band Terra Mellos.
Yeah, I've heard of that band.
So they are a three-piece sort of math rock kind of progressive sound. We talked to them 2 years ago, and the guitarist Nick Reinhardt, phenomenal guitarist, he said if we were to ever hear someone cover our songs, we'd actually want to hear 80s King Crimson cover our song Skin Surf. Now, I know 80s King Crimson is no more, but I'm going to pitch that to you as a possibility for the power trio and do a little nudge, nudge, wink, wink via the internet.
What was the name of the song again?
The song is called, it's called Trident Tail, off their album Patagonian Rats. It is a fantastic little number with weird guitar curiosities.
I'll go with something that I think is actually doable. I have some friends that are called the California Guitar Trio.
Oh, they have a great album. I think it's called Andromeda or something.
They have many great albums, and they're very good, and they play through a lot of different styles, and it's, for the most part, 3 acoustic guitar players.
Right.
Although they do use effects and things. I would like to hear them do their version of the track that I've written called E. I think that would be stunning.
Oh, and that's
doable. I'm not picking somebody that's out of my league, like saying, wouldn't it be great if David Bowie did Lone Rhino? I'm not going to go crazy on it. I'm just going to stay with something that I think is actually even possible.
Well, unfortunately, we couldn't even call David Bowie if we wanted to, but
me either.
And for our final question, what is the perfect sandwich?
Ooh, the perfect sandwich.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I've gone through many sandwich loves and in my life. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I like sandwiches and I fix sandwiches and I have certain sandwiches I enjoy at other places. Oh, that's a tough one. If you ask me a burger, I would say I know exactly where my favorite burger is.
Let's go with that.
Let's not go with a burger because that's a burger. That's not totally just a sandwich. I would say, go to Firehouse Subs and get the turkey bacon ranch sandwich and get it, heated. I think they already do that. That's a pretty good place to start.
All right. Well, Adrian...
Or you could come to my house and I could fix you one of my specialties, but I don't want you all to show up at once, okay?
Staggered visits. All right. Adrian, thank you so much for talking to Riff and Rock Music Talk. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as a huge fan, this is one of those things where once I found out this was going to happen, I was doing one of those awkward happy dances in my living room with enthusiasm because you're just no joke. I mean, and not to divulge too much, but I think it really got into like a couple years ago. I started finally delving into King Crimson, and then I started listening to some other records. My dad gave me Chic Your Booty from Frank Zappa. I heard your name drop at the end of the credits. I'm like, what the hell? He's in this? Then Remain in Light by Talking Heads and, You Can Call Me Out by Paul Simon. Periodically, I'm like, how is he in every single song that I just adore? Or album I adore? And so that was that moment where I'm like, I just need to talk. I have to pick this man's brain because somehow he has wedged his way into my favorite tracks and my favorite album.
Well, I've been very fortunate, and, I sometimes I surprise myself because somebody will say, "Do you remember you played on this and that?" And I'm, no, I don't even know I played on that. It just did a lot of stuff over my life, and I've really enjoyed all of it for the most part. It's it's always fun to get to collaborate with someone that you admire, and it's always fun, of course, to have your own way. Well, thank you. I hope everything went well for everyone, and have a great day. Thank you, Alex. I'll talk to you guys again someday, I hope.